This is the photo we're going to work off today. There's very little to change on this. The only things I would change is this road here. We just leave that out. It's in the wrong place anyway. It's detracting from the painting. This is the focal point. We've got a lovely layout of trees. There's no regular shapes, varying heights, varying gaps between them. And you've got this lovely tree here as the key focal point. And it's just a lovely shape, right? So we're going to leave this out. What would have made this even better was if this lit area was over here and the rain was, say, about here, okay? Because then the eye will be drawn to this even more so. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the same scene, except instead of the storm coming from this way, the storm's going to come from this way. We're allowed to do that because we're artists. Who's to say the next day the storm didn't come from a different direction? So that's all we're going to do. The storm is going to be the biggest part of the painting. The horizon's a little bit below a third. Not too much below a third, because you're going to lose something when you frame this. So we'll just draw our horizon. And keep that pretty horizontal. There's trees in the distance. We'll just very lightly mark them in. Normally I don't draw the trees in, but in this case, because I want the trees where they are, I'm going to draw enough of the trees to have them positioned right. So this big tree, this is the middle of the paper. This big tree is probably about here. I'm not going to draw everything of the tree in, just enough to position it properly. And we've got another tree a bit closer to us near its base. Then we've got a little one here, which is closer to us. The closer a tree is to you, the lower down the photo or the paper will be where the trunk comes out of the ground, right? So there's a small tree here, and then this one's further away still. And again, if this is the middle of the paper, I'm going to move this one just to the right of the middle, something like that. And there's another little one there, little one there. And that gives us a nice little grouping of the trees. And then we've got this big sky. Now this is where we flip things around. We've got the lit sky coming across this way. I'll just very lightly mark that in. So basically this mark here is just to indicate where this area, this line here would be, but on the other side. And then here, I'm just going to very lightly just mark a little shape. It's going to be such a dark sky that you won't see these marks in it. And this is all we're going to do for the drawing. If later we want to make any adjustments, because looking at this now, there may be an argument to put a little tree here, but we can add that in at the end, because all of this area is going to be quite dark, remember, because we're going to have all this rain coming down this way. We'll start by wetting the back as per usual. Great. Okay, we'll just let that sit there. Now let's look at our colours. So what we've got here is a very pale beige, which I usually use very, very weak cat orange for this, and the same with the clouds down here. And then the rest is going to be a cool grey colour. Okay, so for the warmer part of the sky, we're just going to use a little bit of very weak cad orange. Not quite right, we'll add a bit more water. I'm going to dilute it some more. Great, and then for the sky, quite a dark sky, so we'll start with some French ultramarine. And some burnt sienna. I just want to cool it down a little bit. I'm going to add some cobalt blue to that as well. A bit more burnt sienna. Great. Maybe a bit more. I'm happy with that as my mid-tone for the sky. And then here we'll mix a smaller puddle, but we'll make that quite a bit stronger. So same colours, just a lot less water. Nearly there. Great. Okay, that'll work. So there, our sky colours. Not going to worry about painting the foreground at this stage because I want to keep the foreground quite bright, and if I let these colours flow into the foreground they'll just darken that foreground too much. Back here, so I'll just wet this again. I have to be careful that I don't accidentally drop water into my mixed areas in the palette, because that would just dilute the tones and make them a lot weaker. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up some of my warmer colours and just put them in where I want them in the sky. There's a bit more up here too. There's a slightly lighter passage here. Remember, I'm flipping that over, so I'm putting some of that up here. And then down here we've got some of this lighter sky. Now, this area of the sky is quite a bit paler. So I'm going to pick up some of this, my mid-tone, and just going to drop some of that in there, just a hint at distant clouds. But it's a long way away, so we can keep these edges fairly soft and bring some of this down lower. And within this area we'll have a little bit of cloud. Now, if I go in straight away and paint the darkest dark sky, I risk all this dark paint flowing into here. So let me just go dry this. I didn't try and dry anything other than these spots because I still want to keep the back of the paper quite wet. In our situation, the rain is coming in this way, so it's moving into the painting rather than out of the painting. And one of the techniques you can use to create this effect is to pre-wet this part of the sky so that as the darker paint hits it, it automatically is diluted and creates this effect of rain coming down. You'll see how I do that. So the rain's coming this way, and I want it to stop about there. So I'll go beyond that, however. Oh, I don't want it beyond, this far beyond. Just something like that. I'm going to wet this area here. That'll do. All right, now we're going to go in with our, what I'm calling our mid-tone. It might still be too dark. Add a bit more water to it. At this stage, I don't paint into these lighter areas. You'll see what I'll do with that in a minute. Now, we don't want this to be too straight. I'm going to run some clean water down here. This area had dried a bit, so I'm just helping it along with some more water in my brush. Okay. Now we're going with a darker paint. Now I'm just going to clean my brush and I'm going to go in and soften some of these harder edges. Especially this one here. I'm dragging the brush to leave a little bit of a broken edge here and there to create, just a hint of this lit area there. Now I'll get a tissue, just scrunchel it up a little bit. Don't keep pressing with the same part of the tissue, move it around and you're just lightly touching the paper. So here all I'm trying to do is create an interesting pattern in the sky. this is drying too fast. So this area is just there's just a hint of a hard edge there. I'm going to just give it a very light spray, just targeting that area. I don't particularly want to wet the whole sky. Mind you, this might need it too. Let's just see how that goes. Okay. Here is a lighter passage, so I'm just going to lift some of that. In fact, I'll go in with a bit of this warmth. I think it needs an extra line or two here. Okay, this area's just a bit too blue now. Papers look quite wet, so these marks, while they look a little bit dabby, I know that they'll flow and create some interesting shapes. Now what you'll see me doing is I'm lifting the board up to keep it reasonably horizontal because I don't want this paint to keep flowing down the paper. I'm going to mix this a little bit stronger. This area, if I need to soften an edge, I can do that once it's dry. This area here needs just a little bit of paint on it. There's just a few areas that need a small amount of softening, like here. Got to be very careful. It's very easy to create cauliflowers at this stage. And I want hard edges here, but I don't want a hard edge all the way around, so I'm just softening some of that. Just one last thing. I've got this tree here and I want a little bit of light up here. So I'm going to lift some of that paint. So that I can add a bit of light to the tree when I paint it in. I'm just going to go and dry this now with a hairdryer. So for the distant trees, they're very dark green, so I'll just start with the blue. When I'm mixing greens, if it's a dark green, I'll start with my French ultramarine. If it's a light green, I'll start with my aureolin. So I'll grab some aureolin and we'll dull it with a bit of raw umber. That'll do. And it's a relatively small, thin shape, so I'm just going to use my size 8 brush to put the top of this distant hill in. As we get close to these, there's more of a broken edge feel to them because of the trees there. So I'll just use the side of my brush to hint at some trees. And then they disappear into the distance. So make their height smaller and smaller. Now I don't want to paint right to the edge of the bright dry grass, so I'm leaving about 3 millimeters, should be about 1/8 of an inch I suppose. So I've got bigger trees here, and see how they're disappearing as they go into the distance. And I'll put a bit more paint there, because I want this to be a bit stronger in tone. And then we'll grab our fan brush, or my fan brush, and then we're going to drag some of that paint down. You may need to pick up some more paint if there's not a lot of paint sitting at the bottom of that dark green. See how I'm creating the negative shape of the grass. Now, I've got some trees going in here, so I'll just soften that edge. Maybe soften that a bit there. Then another one here. So I'm just lifting some of that paint. I'm going to put another tree over here. So we'll work on the trees while that's drying a bit. So the bright green for the areas that are in light. So I'll have some aureolin. A little bit of cobalt turquoise. That's pretty good. We've got this dark tone here. I'm going to make it a little bit greener with some more aureolin. And that will work. And then for the tree trunks, let's clean part of my palette. For that, just some French ultramarine and burnt sienna will do. You don't want this to be too brown. It will lean a little bit to the brown, but not very much. You can just sort of see a hint of the brown showing through. Before I paint these trees, I'm just going to hit this little area here with a hairdryer, because if I paint through it, there's a good chance the paint will just bleed to either side. Okay. I'm not going to paint this right now because you can sort of see one of the problems I'm going to have is that if I paint the dark trunk and then paint the grass around it, it'll bleed out to either side. So what I'm going to do is paint the grass next. So to paint the grass we need some more clean palette. It's quite a light coloured grass, so we'll just start with some raw sienna. It's what I call dirty raw sienna because it still had some discoloration from the top from the other paints around it. I want this to be a bit thicker. When we painted this distant hill, remember how I stopped before the top of the grasses and then used my fan brush to create the impression of this grass? We do the reverse of that now. So we're going to paint down below that. Like that. Then we'll get the fan brush. Here's my fan brush, there it is. And here and there you'll leave a little bit of a broken edge. Good. Now, quick brush strokes. I'll just add other colours in there just to vary it, because this is not a flat shape. So I'll throw in some raw umber. Pick up a bit of the green, maybe just some of this, just a hint at some of the green here. I don't want too much white paper over there, but I'm happy to have it in the foreground. Just going to lighten this line in the distance. And that sort of just hints at undulations in the grass in the distance. Quite happy with that. Let me dry it and we'll finish it off with the trees. So we've already got the colours we want. My light's going to be coming from this direction. So I'll start with my lightest tones. Now I'll just go in with my darker tones. I just want to make sure that I get enough bright light coming through. Get my rigger for some of these final lines. And you want to paint these trunks and branches in while the foliage is wet. When I clean a brush, you'll quite often see me just tap the brush into a towel first so that I take out 99% of the water so I don't accidentally dilute my mixes. And again, keep in mind the light's coming from this side. That's good. Got just enough light showing on that. Quite happy with that. So here I'm just picking up a little bit of the cad yellow. Now I'm just going to hint at a shadow, because there's no real bright light here. I'll just grab some French ultramarine, a little bit of permanent rose, and there was burnt sienna in this mix. Don't want the shadows to be too prominent. Again, I'll grab my fan brush. So sometimes just little dabs like that is all you need with the fan brush. And underneath some of these little white shapes, I'll just put a little dark mark like that. That turns them into rocks. Just a few of them. And then we'll throw in some birds, trying to escape the storm that's coming through. There's a little splattered dot here, so that becomes a bird first. Maybe another one here. Just darkening the odd shape. Let me just give that a light spray with a hairdryer. Great, and that will do it.